Welcome, everyone. My name is Carl. I'm the Stewardship Director with Mountain Area Land Trust, and this is the Mountain Area Land Trust podcast. We're going to be talking about wildfire mitigation, especially since it's a hot-button topic. The world is on fire currently, especially in the West. And I'm here with Kyle and Matt from Jefferson Conservation District. And we'll kind of talk about what you guys do and how we go about fire mitigation. First off, Jefferson Conservation District. What are you guys? What do you do?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us. I'm Matt, and this is Kyle here. We work for Jefferson Conservation District, so we are a local special district here in Jefferson County, where we partner with private landowners in and around the county to implement conservation-related projects.
But you guys aren't the county, right?
We are not the county. Yeah, that's correct. So we're more akin to a school district or a fire district. Although we are non-taxing, so we really operate more like a nonprofit. And so I've been there for about 5 years working first as a forester and now as the forest program manager. And Kyle started out as the forest biomass coordinator. Is that right, Kyle?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I started as the forest biomass coordinator over 2 years ago. I'm working with the county to operate the slash collection program, and now I'm a conservation forester as part of the forestry program.
Right.
So what's the difference between a biomass coordinator and a forester?
Well, yeah, great question. So we have a number of different programs that have sort of sprung up in the need for conservation and natural resource related work in and around this community. And so our main programs are a forest restoration wildfire mitigation program, and then we also have a noxious weed management program. And then we partner with Jefferson County itself to do the slash collection program that operates every summer, and Kyle can tell you a lot more about that. But then we also just have a fledgling watershed restoration program as well that is just sort of springing up, and we're kind of gearing up to do more of that work in the future.
Sounds. You guys cover a multitude of different things. How long has Jefferson Conservation District been around?
What's the year, Kyle? It's
1942, 1937.
Oh.
Conservation districts were created in the wake of the Dust Bowl, originally called soil conservation districts, as a method of assisting landowners with managing their natural resources. So an event like the Dust Bowl didn't occur again. So Jefferson Conservation District has been around since the late 30s, early 40s. And we, in our current form, it's really only been about 10 years or so of doing the work that we're currently doing.
Yeah, 10, 12 years. But to kind of expand on that, the Dust Bowl was this event back in the 30s where farmers out on the high plains sort of started doing some incorrect agricultural practices and abandoning fields that had been plowed. And all of a sudden there was dust blowing from southeastern Colorado to the eastern seaboard, all the way out over to the Atlantic Ocean. So there was a huge disaster, and it lasted for 5 to 10 years, I think. And so that really spurred the federal government to create the Soil Conservation Service, which is now the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And as a part of that, they decided to implement these localized soil conservation districts for local people to raise their concerns, their natural resource concerns, up to the federal government. And so we do the same thing today. We partner really closely with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS. And so that's a federal agency that many people might not know about, but they are there to help private landowners and farmers and ranchers take care of natural resources and implement conservation work.
I'm already learning so much so far.
Yeah.
So you guys do a lot of mitigation work, and ecological work. What would you say is kind of just the state of wildfire in general? I was just looking at a headline this morning. There's another big wildfire out in California. Are you guys getting the impression that wildfire is pretty prevalent in people's lives day to day now? What do you think? Are they getting worse? Are they getting better? Just general your sense of how wildfire is.
Oh yeah, definitely getting worse. So there's a number of factors playing into that, and we can talk more about sort of why fires are worse now, but it's certainly on everyone's mind that lives in the type of mountain community that we're in now, Evergreen and Conifer. I'm a local resident here, and Kyle's wife grew up here too, and it's one of the people's top concerns who live in this community, myself included. It's honestly one of the only reason that I don't like living here, because it's frankly scary.
Yeah.
And we're in one of the most at-risk communities for a catastrophic wildfire in the entire country. And as many people know, the home insurance situation reflects that.
Yeah.
It's becoming increasingly difficult to get and find affordable homeowners insurance for people who live here. And so, it's wildfire is an issue. It's started to be an issue over the last 20, 25 years across the whole Mountain West. And there really are a number of reasons for that. And the main one is that our forests tend to be overgrown, and that's because of a long history of fire suppression and a misunderstanding of the natural ecological processes that used to naturally manage the forests in the mountainous West. And I'm talking about the dry conifer forests here. I'm not talking about the more temperate rainforests that we see in the Pacific Northwest or forests that are in other parts of the country. We're really focusing on the dry conifer forests that we have here on the Front Range and other parts of Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, the way our forests look now are way more dense than they ever used to be. Like how it used to be is a lot more open, a lot more meadows. You kind of had just trees here and there, just different pockets. And, just with the density of trees, from my perception, it seems like that's probably leading to why wildfires are more active, more intense, more detrimental, more devastation. So, I mean, from my experience, it seems living in Colorado, wildfires in the last 10 years have been a lot crazier than they have been in the last 50. And it sounds like it's due to all of these factors you were talking about. Yeah,
there's quite a few. And sort of the impetus for all of this was the 1996 Buffalo Creek fire, and then the 2002 Hayman fire were sort of these two big eye-opening events that were about 30 years ago, 25 years ago now. And for a long time, that 2002 Hayman fire down on the Pike National Forest was the largest wildfire in Colorado's history in terms of acreage.
Quick test. How many acres?
About, yeah.
No.
It was about 137,000.
Wow.
And so that caused a ton of damage, and people's houses were burned down in that fire. And there's a lot of people listening to this might be familiar with the Cheeseman Reservoir down there on the Pike that is owned by Denver Water. And it was an eye-opener for Denver Water too, because the post-fire effects from sedimentation were super impactful. So what happened is this fire burned at a really high temperature, and it essentially sterilized the soil and killed a lot of the microbacteria and fungi that live in the soil. And people know we're in the Rocky Mountains here, so the soil in general is not the best for growing plants anyway. So that fire really devastated the soil, and we have that Pikes Peak granite around here, and we started getting the seasonal thunderstorms that we get in Colorado, and a lot of that soil ran down the slopes and right into Denver Water's reservoir.
So is that sedimentation you were talking about?
Yes, exactly. And the same thing happened to the Strontius Strings Reservoir, which is right above Waterton Canyon. And so that caused a lot of issues for Denver Water's infrastructure, and obviously it affects the drinking water of people in the city.
So that brings up a point where wildfire doesn't just affect the forests and the burning of timber and structures and all that, but it has kind of lasting effects. It can impact, water quality, the way the soils are afterwards. That's something that I think for one, don't think about a lot when you see a big fire on the news, is the after effects of all that.
Yeah. And it's, 20, 30 years later, and they look similar. Those places, the Ponderosa Pines don't respond well to that overstory crown fire, that severe fire. And so it's, a grassland or, just kind of sandy soil left there. So, it's a long lasting effect. Like you said, that affects not just the immediate, trees being burnt down, but the soil, water, air, all of those things.
Yeah. Definitely very, very impactful. So fire comes in. Definitely. We don't want that. We don't like that. Stating the obvious. So Jefferson Conservation District and forestry or wildfire mitigation. What is that? If I'm a fifth grader, how would you describe what fire mitigation is?
Yeah, so it's really stewarding our forests. that's what it comes down to. So
stewarding, I'm the stewardship director, wink. That's kind of a funny term because I think it's one of those jargony things that doesn't, it could mean a lot to different people. But when you talk about stewardship, are you talking about care for the land essentially?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Sorry to cut you off.
No, that's fine. Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, what do I mean by stewardship? So essentially helping our forests to function as they have for thousands of years before people started settling here and living here in larger numbers. So I'm talking about really the mid 1800s when European settlers started moving across America and settling this area. And so prior to that, our forests here on the Front Range looked far different than they do today, and which you already kind of talked about that. But there's a lot of evidence for that, and that's sort of where the research for the work that we do comes from. But there's old paintings that you can find that show old landscape paintings that show evergreen itself, and you can see in those paintings that there's far fewer trees than there are today. There's historical photos, of course, and then there's the evidence on the land itself. So because it's so dry and we're at such a high elevation here, a lot of the old stumps that were here when the settlers moved and logged some of this area are still out there. So we can go find those and do some forest stand reconstruction and figure out, hey, this was the approximate density of the forest here at this era, and then also fire scars are really good evidence too. So a lot of the old growth trees that are still left here can be dated back to figure out how many fires that tree experienced and what date those fires occurred. So all of that information tells us what the forests used to look like before people moved here and started disrupting the natural ecological cycles that those forests have. And so what we're trying to do with our work is sort of restore the forest, and that hence the term forest restoration, but restore some of those pre-settlement era conditions that would have been naturally found prior to human disruption when we had those naturally occurring wildfires. And earlier, Carl, you said, oh, fire is bad. We don't like fire, but that's actually not true. We do like fire. This community that we all live in here in Evergreen Conifer, the forest up and down the Front Range here, these are fire dependent ecosystems, and they were for thousands of years, and they remain that today. For thousands of years, they function with frequent but low to moderate intensity fire. And the absence of that fire, which was caused by humans, is why we're in the position we are today. And so when we talk about restoring the forest, we want to restore those conditions that supported that low to moderate intensity fire, such that when a fire does occur, it's not as ecologically damaging as those catastrophic fires we were talking about earlier, where every tree for hundreds of thousands of acres is killed and the soil is sterilized. And so our work is, the goal is really to restore those conditions and then promote proper ecological function in the areas that we're working. So
fire mitigation is not just, fire restoration. It's more ecological restoration. You're restoring the forests that give an ecological benefit as well as that fire protection benefit. Now, when you were chatting about the different historical data sets that you guys have, and that goes into your research. So it sounds like you guys go about everything from kind of a research-based point of view, where you assemble the data from years in the past and then try to mimic that. So very science-driven, data-driven, and then it has that human impact as well of what you might be doing with the trees you're cutting down for a particular landowner. So can you talk a little bit more about that, the process of how you go about fire mitigation with a landowner?
Sure, you're gonna take that one, Kyle?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I mean, first things first, find the landowner. That would be our first step when we're, wanting to work with landowners. And so, we can reach people through tons of different means, by just being a neighbor to somebody that we've already worked with in the past, fire districts, you guys even, we get connected with people out there that, are interested in doing the work, maybe see, a lot of times it comes from this initial concern of fire, but, as we work with them and talk with them, they begin to understand some of those ecological concerns that we've talked about as well, and see the whole picture and benefit of these types of projects that we're doing. And so, yeah, what it really comes down to is, there's of course, tons of grants that we secure, and maybe some more boring stuff that we don't have to delve too deep into on the administrative side.
It's probably good to know that you can help with the financial aspect through grants.
Sure.
Especially if you're working with a private landowner who doesn't have a whole lot of money.
Yeah, this work, it has a public benefit. And so, fire, as we say, doesn't stop at the fence line. And so even if, you can't do a project on your property, if your neighbor does one, that does have a benefit to, your land overall. And so there's a public benefit and a community benefit to doing this work. And as a result, there is grant funding, especially because the work is really expensive, and a landowner paying for it all by themselves would be cost prohibitive. And it means that, nothing would ever get done.
Definitely.
So yeah, the grants, there are grants available for this that, we as a conservation district assist the landowner in applying for on their behalf, and help them secure those grant funds that make doing this work, possible on their property.
Yeah.
And so, again, like I was saying, we don't need to get into, I don't want to walk you through every specific detail of applying for the grant and every administrative
We'll be doing a master class in 3 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we work on getting grants and setting up the project. And it's kind of a conversation with the landowner about where do you want to see low intensity fire, or where do you not want to see high intensity wildfire occur on your property? And working from there and saying, okay, well, we can do stuff, do work here and not do work here, based on what you want to see and what you don't want to see, as well as, what's possible. Our projects use heavy, large machinery to complete this work. And so, of course, there's a limit to the terrain that, this machinery can do as well. So not every acre on a particular property is going to be treatable. So yeah, it's about working and figuring out where the landowner wants to work on the project, and where they want to do things. And, can we acquire funding for that project? From there, we work on getting contractors to work on the actual job themselves. So we work with professional logging contractors from around the state and around the country that come in and do this work on landowners' property. And that's where they come in and, do the meat of the work when we, are talking about cutting down, the trees that we don't want to see there, while maintaining trees that would have historically been here and historically have survived wildfire. So
it's sort of a difficult concept, I think, to wrap your head around here. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to do it, but the fact is that the logging work that we're doing on our projects and on these properties is actually conservation work.
Yeah. And
because of some of the bad logging that was done back in the 60s and 70s, especially in the Pacific Northwest, I think logging today has a pretty negative connotation for a lot of people, and it certainly did for me before I learned about the local ecological problems here we have in the Front Range foothills, and so that was really eye-opening for me to learn that, hey, actually cutting trees here is conservation work, because it does feel and sound a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that probably brings up a good point of how there's probably a lot of misconceptions of what it is, fire mitigation is, the work you guys do, especially when you work with private landowners, the public. I'm sure also the communities around are impacted by the work you do. So what kind of misconceptions do you often see with all the people you deal with what fire mitigation or Jefferson Conservation District does?
Yeah, great question. There's
Thank you. I brought my A game today.
There's
You're doing most of the talking, right? So it's making it easy.
There's a lot of misconceptions, but I think one of the main ones that people have is what happens to all this valuable wood that they see coming off of our projects, and so the misconception is that the wood byproducts that we're making from our projects are actually not the main product that we want from these projects. The main product that we want are healthy, resilient forests that can withstand wildfire. And so the wood that's being produced is actually just a byproduct of that work to achieve that goal. And so people tend to think that all these logs and all the biomass is really valuable, but because we're here in the Rocky Mountains and it's dry and relatively dry and high elevation, the trees around here just don't grow that fast, and so they're actually not very valuable. You can't make a lot of 2x4s out of a crooked tree.
Yeah,
we got a lot of crooked trees here. Yeah. And so because of that, there's really not much of a timber industry here, and so what few sawmills there are that can actually process some of the wood that could be turned into a 2x4 are really far away. And so in other parts of the country, you might end up a logging contractor might end up paying a a landowner to come onto their property and harvest trees, but here we have to pay for the work because, again, the product we're making is that healthy, resilient forest.
Yeah.
And so the revenue that might be derived from selling those wood products, once you've hauled them via truck to a sawmill, is not nearly enough to cover the cost of doing the work itself. And so that's why there's public funding available, again, to cover the cost, like Kyle was talking about earlier.
I'd hop on another common misconception is that it's not just dead trees. I think a bunch of the people in the public think that dead trees are the number one fire concern, and that's like, oh, if you want to mitigate your property or if, mitigation needs to be done, just cut down the dead trees and you're good to go. We actually love dead trees. We, want to keep a lot of dead trees on our property. They're great for wildlife habitat and provide a lot of benefits in that way, and are actually not a huge wildfire risk, and actually can be less wildfire risk than a live tree.
Okay.
Where a live tree, has needles on it, that's a lot of fine, flashy fuels to fuel the fire. A dead tree with no needles, not as much of a fire risk there. So it really is, an expansion from like, oh, just cut down the dead trees and, you're good to go. It is a lot further than that. And we actually like to keep the dead trees around.
Well, I learned a whole heck of a lot. I've worked with you guys before, but still always learning. So thank you so much for coming in, chatting with us. And yeah, hopefully there's so many topics and so many different things we can talk about with this. And hopefully in the future, we can maybe expand on it more and, spread more information out there.
Yeah. Thanks for having us, Carl. And if you'd like to learn more about Jefferson Conservation District, you can check out our website. It's just jeffersoncd.com. And there's tons of good information on there. And I'll just give a quick plug to the other agencies and organizations around here doing the same kind of work on public land, because we operate on private land. And so Jefferson County Open Space and Denver Mountain Parks are doing really good work on their properties around this community. And then the state Forest Service and the U.S. Forest Service as well are doing a lot of good work on both public and private land in this area. So there's a lot of work going on, and it's going to benefit everyone, even folks down in the city who rely on the forests here for drinking water.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys again so much for coming in, and hopefully we'll get a chance to sit down and talk more.
Yeah. Thanks,
Awesome.
Carl.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you all for listening. It's your support that makes all this possible. For more information about our work and the different partnerships we have, you can visit us at savetheland.org. Again, that's savetheland.org. Thanks.